So let's bring in David Schuster, Joe Watkins, and Jeannie Zaino again to look at all this. I guess the conventional wisdom has been turned around on a lot of different levels, but let's start with the Democratic race. David, you and I have been looking at the counties, and it could get to the point where Bernie Sanders will overcome Hillary Clinton.
I think the nervousness is very high at this moment in the Clinton campaign, and the expectations and the excitement is growing in Bernie Sanders' campaign simply because you look at Story County, which is Ames, Iowa, the home to Iowa State University. They still have a large number, not a large number, but they have some big precincts still to report. Bernie Sanders has been beating Hillary Clinton among voters younger than 30. 2-1. He will likely pick up a couple of precincts in Ames that might just be enough to put him over the top in terms of the raw delegate count. We see that as 632 to 628. So at best, Hillary Clinton might be able to say that she got a draw tonight, but it's looking also like there's a possibility she may end up losing. And to come out of Iowa without the victory and then to head to New Hampshire, again, a lot of people are now going to take notice of Bernie Sanders around the country and say, who is this guy? What is he all about? That is not the scenario Hillary Clinton wanted on this night.
Yeah, and the other side of the equation is that the conventional wisdom was that Bernie Sanders would do very well if there were a huge turnout, and it's actually turned out to be pretty close. Also expected was that Donald Trump would be able to win if there was huge turnout, which there was, record turnout on the Republican side, and instead he really did not do well.
He did not do well. So I think it's been the entire election, right? We've just been shocked and awed at every turn by what has happened. And, you know, I would just point to as well the polls predicting the latest Des Moines Register poll, really the gold standard that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump would win this thing, and yet we're coming out of this with a Ted Cruz win and what could, as David mentioned, be a Bernie Sanders win, or at least a very, very narrow victory for Hillary Clinton. So it is certainly a night full of surprises.
Right, and of course, one of the big questions, Joe, is going to be whether this somehow punctures the Trump balloon. What do you think?
Well, it slows him down a little bit. I mean, if he had won Iowa tonight and if he'd won it big, he would have had huge momentum heading into New Hampshire and then South Carolina. But of course, now voters in New Hampshire are going to take a closer look at Ted Cruz. Certainly, Marco Rubio is going to get a closer look. He's somebody who did extremely well, better than anybody expected tonight.
Right. He probably upended the polls more than anybody else did.
He did. He did. And then South Carolina. I mean, of course, in South Carolina, which is a very important state, it's going to be a little bit tougher now for Donald Trump to run the table as some suspected he might.
Especially because Rubio just got the important endorsement of the only African-American senator, Tim Scott, who's the senator from South Carolina, and he's also got Trey Gowdy, who's an important congressman, supporting him in South Carolina. So that could be an interesting race there.
It could be interesting, and to the point that Joe's making, this has been a very bad night for the establishment, because, look, this is Ted Cruz winning, a guy who shut down the government against the wishes of Republican leaders. You had folks like Trent Lott and Bob Dole, the former Senate Majority Leaders, and Senator Orrin Hatch say just in the past week they would prefer Donald Trump win the Republican nomination than Ted Cruz. That's how much the Republican establishment hates Ted Cruz and the idea that Ted Cruz is not willing to compromise with anybody. The Republican establishment, so they get a slap in the face tonight with Ted Cruz winning. The Democratic establishment gets a slap in the face because Bernie Sanders wasn't even a member of the Democratic Party
right.
until he joined this race for president.
Yeah.
So,
although the Republican establishment might see some light at the end of the tunnel with Marco Rubio. We're going to talk a little bit more about that.
If Marco Rubio can then fend off the challenge that he's going to face from the governors Kasich and Jeb Bush and Chris Christie, who are waiting for him in New Hampshire.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk more about this in a moment. But